So my name's Josh MacPhee. I live in Brooklyn, and I hang out around here when I get a chance. So hopefully, I know a lot of people here, and hopefully I'll run into you all again in the future. And I just have a couple points, and they're largely about sort of taking stock in where we are in order to, I think that there's not enough honesty about assessing actually the situation that we're in so that we can think critically and honestly about how we could go where we want to go. First, just an aside about the title is that I do think that we should take ourselves more seriously, but maybe not too seriously. At least, I actually think that we're not funny enough. And we should practice more humor, and we need some anarchist stand-up comedians, I think. It would help. It would go a long way. And then the second point is an extension of what Cindy was saying, which is that I think like a sort of soft or a lowercase a anarchism has kind of become the default ideology, so to speak, of the general left, in which even amongst some kind of sectarian groups, when they reach out to the general public, they have to have the veneer of a directly democratic organization. They need to hold public meetings that appear to be run by consensus. There's a lot of sort of values that anarchism carries with it that have kind of been taken on. And I think that's useful and important in it, but there's limitations to that, and there's a couple anecdotes in a way, I guess. One is that, I don't know if people remember, in 1999, there was this thing in Seattle where a bunch of people got together and they tried to fight the WTO, and then there were a bunch of kids running around with spray paint, and they were writing on the walls, "We are winning." And at the time, it just felt great. Yeah, we're winning. And now, I actually think it's maybe been long enough to go back and assess, was there any truth in that statement at all? Like, what does it actually mean to win? What are we winning? And some of the immediate follow-up to the counter-globalization movement and some of the theorizing about it, there's an essay, there's a number of essays that David Graeber has written, one of them, The New Anarchists, and other things, where he basically kind of was following the logic of that graffiti, where he would say, his argument was that in a lot of ways we've already won. And what I think he was trying to articulate is this idea that a lot of the ideas that we have become more mainstream, at least within the left. But I think that really needs to get interrogated, because, okay, so that's happened, but so what? I mean, ultimately, like, have our lives and the lives of most people on the planet substantively changed in a better way in the last 10 years? And if they have they changed better because of anything that, like, we as an anarchist or an anti-authoritarian milieu have done? And I think largely the answer is no. And so that I think we need to be honest about that so that we can start to say, well, we threw a lot at the system and it felt like we were getting somewhere, and now it kind of feels like we're back at square one again. And it's demoralizing, but I think it's necessary, because we need to create a space for us to think through what that means and think through how we are going to do things differently, since we need to keep doing this. So what would it mean to do that differently? What would that look like? I actually think, like, as anarchists, we're kind of like good Christians, where we've sort of salted the planet with info shops and Food Not Bombs chapters and consensus-run, group houses and indie medias and land takeovers and all these things, all these experiments, which are really extremely valuable, and in them, us as a us learn all kinds of new different social relationships with each other, learn different skills. All these things are important and need to keep happening. But even in their broadest and largest sense, like the MST in Brazil, or things that are approaching mass level, there's still I don't see any of us trying to figure out a strategy for moving from these ultimately isolated and relatively small in the scale of the global population experiments to actually an idea of how that would become the seeds of a dominant new world system in which we would actually live in the ways that we want and not have to interact with each other through the social relationships dictated by capitalism. And I think that that's an extremely, maybe to me, the most important question. And I think that in part because we've become sort of soft dominant on the left, we don't ask it. Because there's a countervailing thing where I think most anarchists are kind of addicted to marginalization. So on the one hand, it's like, oh, well, we're not that big and we're not that important, so we don't actually have to really figure these questions out. Well, then who the fuck's going to do it? I mean, like, the people that have tried to figure these things out in the past and have been relatively successful, Lenin, Mao, I mean, I think that most of us would have some serious problems with how that's played out. And so, if we don't want to just default to those same characters figuring out these questions, then we need to start doing the work to figure that out. How to do that? I think we all need to figure that out together. I mean, I don't want to just throw that out and step back, but I mean, I really think that part of it is that I don't know. I don't think any of us really know, but I think that we need to acknowledge that and then try to start having as many conversations as possible and as many activities as possible that attempt to sort of engage in that so we can start hammering away at that question.